Thanks, guys.
And this is the book, in case you haven't picked it up yet. It's awesome, and you need to get this, and Dave will be signing them for you personally if you'd like afterwards as well. And we're going to have our own Carl illustrating some of the points that Dave's going to be talking about with a little bit of play. And have a good time. Thanks for coming.
Great. Hi, guys. So I thought I'd just get started and use one of my amps as a demo to just talk about a few concepts, because this particular amp, RG88, is got a bunch of different things going on there, and I thought it'd be a good point to talk about a few concepts and then start getting you guys to ask me questions, things that you want to know about. This amp is odd because the first channel of this amp is a Marshall and a Tweed amp put together. The front end of the amp and the EQ is essentially a Marshall, and the power amp is essentially a Tweed amp. Like the phase inverter and all that stuff are like a Tweed amp. So it'll break up pretty easily like a Tweed amp, but then the power supply has got my sag circuit thing in it, so it's really tight, or you can crank up the sag knob on this thing and make it really loose. The other cool thing about this amp is right now Carl's got two 6L6s and two EL34s in there, and we can switch back and forth with these two switches, leaving everything the same, and just switch between those two types of tubes just to really see exactly the differences between those two types of tubes, because I've seen a lot of stuff about how 6L6s are wicked bright and EL34s are mid-rangey and dark, and actually the opposite is true. It's just the amps they happen to be in are built that way. Fender amps are really, really bright, and they're kind of overcoming the 6L6 mid-range and less bright aspects of them. And Marshall amps, yes, they can be bright, and a lot of it is the EL34s, but they're not lacking bass or anything, and it's just a good example of trying this stuff out. So I thought we could have Carl play a little bit. I don't know how the mic levels are going to go with this. Start with 6L6s on the first channel. Okay, so those are 6L6s, and I'm not going to change anything else, just change those two tubes out, EL34s in. So as you can see, the EL34s are like louder, gainier, but they have much more of a hi-fi kind of thing going on. If you were to make a stereo amp, definitely would want to use EL34s, not 6L6s. We can play around with the power supply sag thing and see what that's doing. That might be an interesting thing. So let's reset our ears, and okay, this is with the sag all the way down, so the amp is wicked tight with EL34s. Okay, and then I'll turn the sag way up. So you can kind of see how the amp starts getting compressy, and it's going to distort a lot more, and the high end starts coming out of it. It's not as loud as it was before, and that's basically what the whole sag concept is about. You know, when people are playing with different rectifiers and stuff, that's what they're trying to control, is that aspect of your amp. Generally speaking, on a regular amp, the louder you play, the more that's going to happen. Since you have the knob, you can do it whenever. But even on this amp, the louder the wattage knob, that's this one knob over here, the louder that is, the more you can make it sag. That knob changes the whole amp, as if you built it to be a 5-watt amp or built it to be an 80-watt amp kind of thing.
How many watts is that one?
This amp right now, if I turned on all 4 of the tubes, it should be around 88 watts. And right now it's set at 4, so it's probably putting out about 10 watts maybe right now. And it's all the distortion's coming from the power amp, so you're getting as much as the power amp can make. So if you want, we could, I don't know what's going to do to the camera levels, but we could
turn this sucker up.
Turn it up and see what I'm going to turn the sag all the way down, because then it's even louder. What's that?
Close the door. No, it's good.
It's good? Okay.
Can I just ask you a question?
Kind of police
here.
It's his store. What do you want to do?
I want the cops.
You want the cops? Okay, so the sag, you know, as you heard it compressing and all that, if you have the sag up, it's not going to be as loud. It can't. So I'll turn the sag all the way down and we can see what it's going to do. Why don't we start with it all the way down, with the wattage down, and play it. What's that? Right now it's 2 EL34s and that's it.
Okay, but I had a question.
Yeah.
We're talking about switching EL84s to 6L6s.
Yes.
Can you put both of them on so you have the EL84s and 6L6s at the same time?
Yes, you may. Why don't we crank it up with the EL34s, and then I'll kick on the 6L6s too when we get there. Okay, so this is EL34s all the way down. So it still sounds like an amp should sound, it's just wicked quiet. So it's putting out maybe half a watt, maybe, you know, something like that, maybe a watt. And we turn it all the way up, it should be putting out about around 40 watts. And just as a point of demonstration, why don't we just turn the sag all the way up when he's doing that. Cool, cool, okay. So play it like that, and then I'll switch on the 6L6s. So you can kind of see the mid-range kind of filled in there when I did that. In any tube amp, as long as the pairs of the tubes are matched, it's okay if two different pairs aren't matched. On this amp, you can put two 6V6s and two KT88s in it at the same time, and that'd be fine. In any amp, as long as the pair is matched. The output transformer, you don't want it to be unbalanced in that. That's the key, is you don't want to have the current going through each of a pair to be exactly the same. Otherwise, you'll saturate your output transformer and it does weird things. If those two are matched, the other two can be anything different as long as they're matched too. And in fact, I could put one 6L6 and one EL34 in there, and as long as those were matched when they were idling, with the bias, that would be okay. Because you just want the bias current to be the same. Now that would be an odd thing to do. One half the waveform would be EL34 and the other half would be a 6L6. It would sound funny, but I've had customers who do it, and it's not hard on the amp. You just gotta make sure they're matched. And that goes for any amp. That was all power amp tone we've been doing. So we'll go to the preamp. There's a second channel on this amp that has a lot of preamp gain. Not, you know, a huge amount, but some of it. And there's a master volume. So I'll turn up the wattage. So the power amp has lots of headroom. And I'll turn down the master volume. So it's just the preamp that's going to distort. Okay? Turn up, the gain's pretty high. And I'll turn down the master volume. Yeah, did I switch? Sorry. So there's a lot more complex harmonics going on when you have preamp distortion, because the power amp, when it distorts, because it's the pairs of tubes and it's this push-pull thing going on, you only get odd harmonics. So with a preamp, you get both. So preamp has a lot more thickness to it than a power amp distortion can have, but the problem with it is you can also get a lot of really squirrely sounding high-end harmonics. I mean, we've all heard cheap amps with the preamp that sounds like it's all buzzy and stuff, because it's so easy to have all these too many harmonics in a preamp. But generally speaking, if you do a preamp well, it can be a lot thicker sounding than a power amp, just because the power amp automatically gets rid of all even harmonics. This particular amp, since I can adjust the sag regardless of what's going on, you can see how the sag affects the preamp itself and not just the power amp. So if you play a little bit, and then we'll turn up. Okay, so that's no sag, and that's live. So it does the same thing to the preamp as it does the power amp. So it's just a good demonstration of when you have a big amp and you're cranking it, the power supply sagging is affecting the whole amp. It's not just the power supply itself. So that can be very useful, because if you take an amp like a PD 5150, which is, you know, less than good sounding, and you sag the crap out of it. Hartley, don't kill me for that one. I actually put a sag circuit on a PV1 5150 long ago. And if you sag the crap out of that thing, it actually takes out a lot of the higher harmonics and it sounds a lot better. I don't want to spend my life modifying 5150s, and it's not worth it because to modify it costs more than the amp itself. But it's a good demonstration of taking out the high harmonics and smoothing out the amp in general by making the power supply more responsive instead of just really tight. So, you know, all these things are good to keep in mind. If you've got an amp that's too much, even though it's a metal monster, you might want to have your tech put in a rectifier tube. You know, it will help the whole amp even if you're all into metal. Is my supposition, or there's some other ways you can go about it I've mentioned in the book. But I think a lot of people who do play metal don't crank their amp up enough to actually get to the point where the power amp is sagging. And it's unfortunate. They should crank it more so it'll calm it down. You know, put it in another room, play through a 2x12, whatever it takes, or take 2 tubes out of the thing. Whatever you got to do to make it so you can hit the power amp a little more.